You may think having a will is enough, that it's the responsible thing to do, and once it's signed, you've tied up all the loose ends of your life. But here's the hidden truth, the thing that trips up so many loving families. A will is really only half the story. The real danger, the place where families can get completely fractured, isn't what happens after you're gone. It's what can happen in that challenging and often pretty long period before.
And this single oversight, this one conversation that just feels too hard or too far away to have right now, is the biggest source of preventable pain for the people you love the most. It can lead to court battles, huge expenses, and just heartbreaking family fights that can echo for generations. But here's the good news. It is 100% preventable. This isn't about some complex legal trick. It's just about clear, proactive communication. And in this explainer, we're going to show you exactly how to navigate it with grace and, most importantly, with clarity.
All right, we've put together a really clear roadmap for you. We're going to start with the hidden truth, why a will just doesn't cover everything. Then we'll dive into the void of authority to see what the real risk of waiting is. After that, we'll get to the solution, the 4 pillars of control. We'll also give you a practical guide for how to have this conversation, explore the incredible peace it brings, and then we'll wrap up with one simple, clear first step you can take today.
Okay, so let's get right to the heart of it. We've all been trained to focus on the will, right? On what happens after we die. And look, that's important for sure, but it totally ignores a phase of life that, thanks to modern medicine, is getting more and more common. A time when you're still very much alive, but you can't speak for yourself or manage your own life anymore. And that is where the real crisis begins for families who just weren't prepared. This slide really lays it all out. Think of it as 2 different worlds. A will, it only gets activated by death. It's a one-time event that hands out your assets. But the conversation we're talking about, that gets activated by incapacitation. It doesn't give away things, it delegates authority. A will says who gets what, but this conversation, it explains the crucial why behind your choices, which can mean everything for family harmony. So here's the key difference. One manages your inheritance, the other manages your life when you can't.
So, what actually happens when this conversation doesn't happen? Well, when we fail to talk about it and get the right legal documents in place, we don't just leave things up in the air. We create something way more dangerous, a legal and emotional vacuum. We create what's called a void of authority, and it's inside this void that families can completely fall apart, even the ones that have always been super close.
And that's the question we really have to ask ourselves, right? What is the real risk here? This isn't some abstract legal idea. The risk is tangible, it's emotional, and boy, is it financial. It's that moment a crisis hits, a sudden illness, an accident, and your kids are looking at each other in a hospital waiting room, and it just dawns on them with this sinking feeling. Nobody's in charge. No one knows what to do. No one has any idea what you would have wanted. This brings us to the most important word here, incapacitation. It could be from a stroke, a bad accident, or the later stages of a disease like dementia. It's really any time when you're alive, but you just can't make or communicate your own decisions. And let's be crystal clear about this. In that situation, your will is just a piece of paper. It has 0 legal power until you've passed away. It can't help your family pay your mortgage, it can't get them into your bank account for medical bills, and it can't tell the doctors what kind of care you want.
And the consequences of this void they're severe. Without someone you've chosen to make decisions, your family gets forced into a public, really expensive court process. It's often called guardianship or conservatorship. A judge, a total stranger, gets to decide who controls your life and your money. Your kids are left to guess and often argue about agonizing medical choices. Siblings get pitted against one another, fighting over money or even just who gets to visit you. And in our world today, critical access to things like online bank accounts and digital assets can be lost for good.
Okay, that was the problem. It's heavy stuff, I know, but the solution is actually incredibly empowering. It's not about complicated legal talk. It's all about clarity. It's about building a solid structure made of 4 pillars that gives your family total control and takes away all the guesswork. This is how you take back control from the courts and keep it inside the family, right where it belongs. This is how you actually make your family's bond stronger for the future. The guiding principle for this whole thing is simple, but it's really profound. Clarity is the legacy. We tend to think our legacy is the money or the house we leave behind. But the most valuable, the most lasting legacy you can leave is a clear, actionable plan that protects your family from chaos and conflict. It's the gift of peace of mind. It's one final act of protecting the people you love. Let's dig into Pillar 1, healthcare decisions. This means you legally name a healthcare agent. That's the one person you trust to talk to doctors for you. But it goes deeper than that. It's about having a real conversation with that person about your values, about what a good quality of life means to you, and what you want when it comes to life-sustaining treatment. You're not just naming a person. You are lifting the single heaviest emotional burden your child will ever have to carry, the burden of guessing in a crisis.
Pillar 2 is all about financial management. This is the practical stuff. Who's going to pay your mortgage, manage your investments, file your taxes if you can't? You need to legally name a financial power of attorney. And it's not just about giving someone access, it's about handing them a clear map of your financial life. Just as important, you have to have a secure, organized way to give them access to the accounts they'll need. This pillar keeps the financial gears of your life from grinding to a halt when things get tough.
Now for Pillar 3, and this is one that people overlook all the time, sentimental assets. You might be shocked to learn that the biggest family fights after a death are rarely about the house or the money. Nope, they're about mom's wedding ring or dad's old watch. These things have huge emotional weight. This pillar is about not just saying who gets what, but more importantly, explaining why. Saying, I want you to have this because I remember how much you always loved it. That little story, that context, is what diffuses the emotional bombs before they can ever go off.
And finally, Pillar 4, your final wishes. Do you want a big celebration of life or a quiet service? Burial or cremation? These are deeply personal questions. Answering them now gets rid of one last agonizing round of decisions for your family when they are at their absolute most vulnerable. It frees them from the stress of guesswork and lets them focus on grieving and honoring you, totally confident that they're doing exactly what you would have wanted.
So now we have the 4 pillars, that's the what. Now we've got to tackle the how. Because, knowing what you need to talk about is one thing, but actually starting that conversation, that's a whole other ballgame. The key is to create a safe, structured, and effective space for this talk. It really doesn't have to be scary or morbid. It can be an act of profound organization and love, a true gift to your family.
Here is a 4-step approach that works like a charm. First, reframe it. Don't call it the talk about my death. Call it a meeting to give them a gift of clarity. That framing alone takes away so much of the fear. Second, schedule a formal meeting. Don't just spring it on them over Thanksgiving dinner. Send an email saying, hey, I'm getting my affairs organized and I want to make sure you all have the info you need. Third, use your legal documents, like your power of attorney, as the agenda. This makes it less personal. You're not just talking about feelings, you're just going over the paperwork. And fourth, think about talking about the sentimental stuff first. It manages expectations early and shows this is about fairness and love, not just about the money.
Now, when you do this, when you push through that initial discomfort and have this conversation, you create something absolutely incredible for your family. You create a legacy that goes so far beyond money. We like to call it the peace dividend. It's the long-term, positive ripple effect of your planning on the relationships that you care about most. Because that's really what this is. Your job of protecting your kids doesn't just stop when they turn 18. It goes on for their whole lives. And making sure they aren't burdened by your lack of planning, well, that is the ultimate act of responsible, loving parenting. You're protecting their future well-being and, just as critically, their relationships with each other.
The real takeaway here is that the communication you start now while everyone is calm and healthy is the single most effective tool you have. It's like a vaccine against future conflict. It makes sure that when a crisis finally does hit, your family can pull together instead of being torn apart by all the stress and uncertainty.
And this right here is the dividend they receive. They get the chance to grieve you properly, without the guilt of having to make a life or death decision in a vacuum. They get freedom from the legal chaos of court. They are protected from the awful financial fights that can poison sibling relationships forever. And most importantly, they get the gift of certainty, that deep, comforting knowledge that they are honoring your true wishes. Wow, we have covered a lot of ground. We've gone all the way from the hidden dangers of an incomplete plan to the really powerful solution of the 4 pillars. So let's just boil all of this down into one final, actionable thought that you can take with you from this explainer. If you remember just one thing from all of this, let it be this. The conversation is the tool that turns uncertainty into shared clarity. And it's that shared clarity that is going to secure peace for your family long, long after you're gone. It's the bridge from chaos to calm. So here is your gentle challenge. You don't have to have the whole conversation tomorrow. Just take the first step. Open up a document or a notebook and just outline the facts for your 4 pillars. Who's your pick for your healthcare agent? Where are your financial accounts? What are the key sentimental items? What are your final wishes? Just getting the facts down on paper is a massive first step. So in the end, What's the real takeaway here? It's that the single most important part of your plan isn't a document, it's a conversation. The one that stops chaos from taking over when a crisis hits. It's remembering to address those 4 pillars: your healthcare, your finances, your sentimental assets, and your final wishes. Taking this one action, having this one conversation, ensures that your wishes are known, but it does something even more important. It ensures your family remains united. And leaving behind a family that is whole, at peace, and connected, well, that is the most precious legacy you can possibly leave.